Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 14th of August 2013. Hey, we're back for another podcast. I'm Phil Hinton, editor of AVForums, and joining me for this edition are audio reviewer Ed Selly.
Hey Ron, I'm riding a furry tractor.
Movies editor Simon Crust.
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down.
Games editor Mark Botwright.
Tits McGee's on vacation.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
I love lamp.
And AVForums assistant editor Steve Withers.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Hey.
Well sold.
Yeah. Because your acting skills there, Steve, are first class.
Presumably, I don't know, if we've got the beep thing in action, is someone going to be able to sign off going the actual classic Ron Burgundy auto prompter moment?
I'm sure the beep is going to be in full use this evening, so I'm sure that can be used at some point. So before we go to hardware news, just catch up quickly on Pram news. Ed, it was delivered this week.
It arrived this morning, completely unexpectedly. Massive box. Haven't yet managed to get it out of said box, but obviously...
Are we talking about the Pram now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and at the moment, literally, for an individual who, even when he gets here, is going to be less than a foot long and weigh about £8, about 150 pounds weight worth of stuff has turned up in the last 48 hours. It's messy, but no, I'm saving the Pram until a bit later on. I'm plowing through a lot of review stuff at the moment, but going to break that out, get in training, work out how all the bits work, and I don't know. I haven't had massive buyer's remorse yet, but I'm sure that'll come later on.
Wait till you get the credit card bill.
Yeah,
it's only money.
Anyway,
actually, if it's on the credit card, it's not even that yet.
So let's move on. LG dropping prices, talking about money on 4K TVs. We mentioned this a couple of podcasts back that they were actually $1,000 more expensive than Sony and Samsung. So no surprise really that they've brought their prices in line and made the excuse that they've cut some features out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have been surprised if they didn't cut the price, to be honest.
Yeah, they must have been listening, I think, to be honest. It was always going to be a hard proposition, a new sell in a not established market. And a grand more than your competitors, you're not going to do it. So they've cut the motorised 4.1 speaker bar that no one wanted anyway, and a built-in camera, and they've got 1,000.
So they've cut the one feature that was pretty much pointless on a 4K TV, because anyone buying that TV is going to have their own 5.1 system already, aren't they?
You would hope so.
You kind of wonder why they don't just, with these kind of high-end TVs, why they just don't bother just take the speakers off entirely. I mean, the 65-inch Sony 4K, had great speakers, but to be honest, people buying that TV are probably not going to use them. Cut the cost a little bit more, and if people want to add speakers, then provide that as an option. I mean, that's what they used to do with the old Pioneer Kuros, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
Presumably, you technical types might be able to confirm this. This is these sets, price reduction or not, they're still no nearer resolving any of the ongoing doubts about whether they actually have the correct HDMI board in to be useful for more than the next 25 minutes.
No, I think LG have been completely silent on that one. I think at least Samsung. So Sony and Samsung have acknowledged it. LG, I can't remember them, and it's saying anything about HDMI 2.
Samsung said that their Evolution kit would be a way of upgrading, but as far as I'm aware, the Evolution kit is a software, is a plug-in. Well, certainly is on this year's televisions, or rather last year's televisions, to be upgraded to this year's platform. You plug in this a small device into the back that basically gives it the quad-core processing and the higher, the different software. But we're talking about HDMI 2.0. That's going to be a whole new HDMI board.
Unless you're going to have some clunky adapter, then you've got an HDMI board hanging off the back of your telly, which is doesn't look too pretty.
That'll look nice. Yeah.
So it'll be a third party, not a third party, but an accessory, an adapter or something like that. No doubt they'll be able to plug in.
But as it stands, they're still asking you to drop $5,000 on something with an indeterminate lifespan.
Yes. That's
awesome. Where do I sign?
Obviously, LG don't listen, Mark, because they're still talking to us this week. They wouldn't be talking to us if they listened last week.
This is true.
Talking about Samsung, moving on, curved OLED. They've also dropped prices on that. Is it available? I haven't seen it for sale anywhere.
It's in Korea. So this is only in Korea, as far as we know. So it's come down from 9.9 million won, which is about 5,200, to from £8,700. So it's 34% off, which is quite a reasonable saving. But I think everyone's realised no one really wants a curved TV in the first place. So maybe they're just trying to shift stock before announcing the next generation of the thing we're not going to see.
And
I don't know, if you were sentimental for all those geometry errors you used to get on those whacking great CRTs, it could be just the thing.
Well, yeah.
Or am I missing the point?
I don't think anyone's really got the point.
I think the reason they've got curved OLEDs is just purely because you can do that. There is no other reason.
Yeah,
for
it's
it.
flexible, so we will flex it.
yeah, I mean, they keep saying that it's cinematic, but obviously you have a curved projection screen when you're using an anamorphic lens, because it corrects the issues when you put the anamorphic lens in front of the projector. That's why some cinema screens are curved, and they say it's cinematic because it's curved. Bollocks.
Doesn't matter. It's just 55 inches. Does it really matter anyway?
Yeah, no, exactly. On a 10-foot wide or 50-foot wide screen, that's one thing. On a 55-inch screen, unless you're sat exactly in front of it, you're not going to see a decent picture at all.
They look
So
pretty
I
good in
guess-
photos. I think that's.
Yeah, well, I guess if it's for one person who's going to use it on their own to, I don't know, maybe play games or something like that, it
Show
might
off.
be fun.
It's exactly
Yeah.
what I was going to say. It would be a fantastic as a monitor, wouldn't it? A games monitor. When you sit, 3 inches from the screen, all peripheral vision.
So that's its one purpose.
So we should get Mark Botright to review this then, Mark.
No, that'd be PC gaming. That's not my avenue.
Well stepped aside, sir.
Yeah, okay. Right, so that's the hardware news for this week. 4K and OLED, always seem to be talking about it, but it is a bit quiet. Reason it is quiet is that IFA is just around the corner, first week in September. So I have no doubt that we're going to have lots of hardware to talk about that week. Steve, you're going over. Are you going over this year, Ed?
Probably not, as it stands. But I do have people who are going over. So if there's things that Steve misses, if he's just distracted by Showgirls, I'm sure that I'll be getting an inside line on some of the things as well.
So
I mean,
I guarantee he will be.
I don't know. Last year, I thought Philips's ironing competition was the most diverting thing that I found on display. That was just bizarre.
Oh, dearie me.
No, I explained it last year. You could actually compete with the Philips all singing, all dancing, amazing iron against the Dutch national ironing champion. And yes, there was one. And he was only using an ordinary iron, and it was to demonstrate just how unbelievable the Philips iron is.
Dutch and it would be a bloke. Yeah, this is everything you need to know.
Everything's flat over there anyway. Flying it.
Okay, let's move on to some tech news. Asus had a product launch last week, but Steve's only managed to get around to writing about it today in typical fashion. So what did they launch, Steve?
Well, it was last Thursday, so to make it sound like it was the beginning of last week. They basically launched
AVForums, always at the cutting edge of bringing you tech news 3 days late.
Basically, they launched their new lineup of tablets and notebooks. It was under the banner of back to school, so obviously they were targeting people, students predominantly, I guess, or maybe school children as well. I don't know how well equipped school children are these days, but it's been so long since I was at school. Maybe they all sit there with their laptops open now. But yeah, they basically had their tablets and they had their notebooks. So on the sort of tablet side of things, their sort of big win this year and last year as well, I guess, has been the fact that Google have used Asus to produce the Nexus 7. So they had the latest version of Nexus 7 there, which I've got to say is a wickedly highly spec'd 7-inch tablet. And, certainly will give the iPad mini a good run for its money. If you're one of those people that doesn't want anything to do with Apple and you're an Android fan, then certainly it looked really impressive. I had a play with it. I've got to admit, I'm a bit of an Apple fanboy, and I'm not that familiar with Android as an operating system, and I didn't find it as intuitive to use as I find Apple stuff. And I did point out to Asus whilst I was there, I said, they produce some really, really good, innovative and well-specified kit, really well made, very, very keen pricing. But they just have a little bit of an image problem. They just inherently aren't cool.
It's just a PC manufacturer everyone thinks about, don't they?
Yeah. Well, they're just not very cool. And they said, yeah, that's true. We're not very
Cooler
cool.
than Microsoft, probably.
Well, yes, that's true. They said that
if ever there was the term "damning with faint praise," I think that probably covers it.
Cooler than Sylvester McCoy.
Well, Apple's obviously cool, but the second largest manufacturer of tablets is Samsung, and they said they're not very cool either. And are, they got their eye on basically dislodging Samsung from the number 2 slot. I think, but with all the best will in the world, it's going to, they're not going to dislodge Apple at the moment. I mean, they are so utterly dominant in the tablet market. They did have also had their what they called their MeMo, M small e capital M capital O, which is their sort of cheaper, their sort of generic, if you like, Asus tablet as opposed to the Nexus.
Yeah, it looks like the Nexus 7.
It's exactly like the Nexus 7, but slightly less
shell,
specified. Not quite specified. So as they put it, it won't win all the benchmark tests the way Nexus 7 will, but it's a bit cheaper. So
how much was that one, Steve?
That was 129 for the basic model. It is pretty good value, yeah. And I had a good look at the two, and they are very similar. When you get them up next to each other, you can see the differences, but it's not obvious. And they said, look, for people that aren't that concerned about amazing performance and features that you can get on the Nexus 7, then this is a cost-effective alternative. Very true. They had their transformer there, which I think is a great idea, and I'm surprised why people don't do it. But it's a Windows tablet with a notebook docking station with the keyboard and everything, so you either have it as a notebook or as a tablet. They then had their transformer trio, which takes it sort of to the next obvious stage, which is tablet, notebook, and PC. So you've got the tablet part, the notebook part, and also a docking station to turn it into a PC as well. So that again, that's
did that one run Android as well as Windows?
Yes. No, it ran Windows on the tablet, so it was all Windows operating system, I think.
Right. Wasn't the one that did dual Windows and?
Oh, maybe it did do both.
Android.
Yeah.
I proofed it this morning. I'm sure there was mentioned.
I wrote it this morning.
Well observed.
Yes, you're right. It does, because I remember it was talking about seamlessly transitioning from one operating system to the other. I mean, Asus had a range of their new notebooks on display as well, and I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't seen the numbers, but I'm not sure how well. I mean, that's the kind of market that Asus almost helped develop from the beginning, the notebook market, and I'm not quite sure how their sales numbers are looking now compared. I mean, tablets basically have almost overnight destroyed the laptop.
Yeah, next year they're projected to sell by about 4 to 1, aren't they? Tablets to notebooks. Yeah, which is some turnaround.
Talking about tablets, quick bit of news, Mark, about the new iPad.
Prospectively, yet again, the rumour comes in from Southeast Asian suppliers. So this is people involved in the supply chain. And this is the prospect of the next iPad, the full-size one, using the same touchpad technology as the iPad mini does now, which is one of the reasons it's so light and comfortable to hold. So it's not just the fact that it's smaller, it's the fact that it doesn't use glass and it's touchpad tech, and it uses a different kind of filter, which makes it much lighter. So there's a prospect of that being included in the next iPad, which I think would be good news, because I think they can get quite heavy after a while.
Sorry, are you severely malnourished? I'm sorry, I got an iPad 3 here. At no stage in the year I've had it have I thought, blimey, this small item is incredibly heavy.
Do you hold it? How do you hold it? Do you hold
it
does
get heavy, Ed. It does get heavy, especially if you're reading. It gets very heavy if you're holding it in your hand.
Clearly, I read heavier books than you guys. No, I'm joking aside. Every time this sort of comes up, I'm just innately skeptical.
I honestly mean it.
Making something light and then still feel solid is a dark art. And I'm not a particularly big fan of the iPhone 5. I think it feels, I don't feel it sort of is desperately substantial in the hand.
You fondled an iPad mini?
Yes, and I'm not.
And they feel quite nice, don't they? I think they've got it right with that. So if it just translates,
I'm really not convinced. I just like Mr.
They will
Heavy
make it lighter in time. They're bound to.
So Ed, you just like it bigger than 7 inches. That's the issue.
That as well. Yes. No, I joking aside, I just think one of the reasons I've been a big fan of the iPad is that it feels quite a substantial piece of kit in the hand, and obviously, yes, thanks to my extensive knowledge of gentleman's literature, maybe I'm just more like Popeye than the rest of you. It's hard to say, but I've never found it heavy.
Do you tend to do you ever kind of hold it like a waiter would hold a tray? And so where you spend a lot of time typing on one or anything like that? Because if you try and hold it kind of prop it up in one hand and you do, say, a lot of typing, then it really does start after it. You think, no, that's fine. And then when you take it out of that hand, if you've been sat there for kind of half an hour or something, all of a sudden you feel this kind of cramp in your forearm. That's where I think things like the iPad
it on
Mini.
the flat when I'm typing on it, to be honest. But I actually don't hold it in either hand. I just type on it in landscape. But maybe that's where I've been going wrong all these years. Just me, I guess. But no, I get where you're coming from, I guess. But it's not, joking aside, I just don't. I would be very sketchy about sacrificing just the way it feels. I mean, maybe this is my hi-fi sort of ancestry coming out, where fundamentally big solid things are things that we equate as being good. I mean, we could all but review hi-fi by weight.
Yeah, you don't have to sit there holding your speaker, do you? I mean,
Well,
your amp.
I'm obviously
This is the
reference
geekiest
status.
show of bravado I've ever heard. I don't find an iPad terribly heavy. Now give us your dinner money.
Tickets to the gun.
Gives you bitcoins, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on a little bit. HTC seem to be, other than their executives all quitting, seem to be doing okay in terms of their media campaigns. They seem to be everywhere at the minute. And Robert Downey Jr. is signed on, Steve, for their new campaign.
Yes, they have. Obviously, they're trying to make themselves look cool, because obviously they're also competing with Apple. And to do so, they brought in Robert Downey Jr., who seems to be playing a version of Tony Stark in the advert I saw, where he
He's playing
basically
himself, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I guess Tony Stark is just him,
he's
isn't
just
it?
being him.
Yeah. Reeling off random. What did he say? What was his version?
Humongous tinfoil catamaran.
Yes, that's right. I have
And
no idea what that means.
It's going to be a series of campaign of adverts with bizarre phrases using HTC.
What I don't understand is why Downey Jr. is bothering. He made 30 million. He made 30 million from the Avengers. He made 50 million off of Iron Man 3. He does not need
You
the
can't
money.
you can never have enough money.
Maybe he really
I
is.
couldn't be asked. I
It's a
just
way
take
of
the
keeping
cash
score.
and.
I mean, where's he going to go with, the letters HTC? There's not a lot of scope there, is there? I mean, obviously, the first one's been silly.
Horrible tinny crap.
That's maybe a little bit too close to the mark there.
It must be said, looking at the article, that is a very smart cat he's holding. I don't know if that has any bearing on the advert. But
Why would you be interested in the cat?
I
Your
like
interest
cats.
seems to cats and prams, and very heavy hi-fi equipment. That's it for you, isn't it? Really.
I have a diverse and wide-ranging set of interests. Thank you very much.
Just three of the things you like.
Just, if I could make it scan to the my favourite thing song, I would, but I'll have to work on that.
Okay, Steve, I think this other story's mainly for you. So when you lived in Japan, what was your toilet like?
Yeah, I did that.
Didn't have one.
When I lived in Tokyo, I had one of those Japanese toilets with it was like a Captain Kirk's chair on the Enterprise with a control panel down the side.
The thing that always disturbs me is that it's heated when you sit down.
Yeah, it's nice. You get used to that. I tell you, you miss it when you don't have it anymore. Lovely warm seat from you sat down, flushes itself when you get up. You haven't got to do anything. It's all remote control. You can have a bidet and all sorts of stuff. And they always have these like little icons. So like as an arse shape with water spraying up towards it. It's brilliant. Anyway, they've got public toilets that are equally as complex. And there's one that can be controlled with an app. Unfortunately, the app's been hacked. I'm not quite sure what that means. Does that mean they're going to start shooting water up your jacks?
Apparently, they found several back doors.
Oh, nice.
Sorry, I was early with that.
Yeah, I can see where this is going.
Time to put that joke in.
Seemingly, the app has a password control, and the password defaults to 0000. So you can take over any toilet. Now, you can just imagine somebody outside a tower block in Tokyo with this app and setting the bidet away and closing and opening it.
What I don't understand is there are controls right next to you. So why do you need the app?
You don't have to touch it.
Because there's one thing you can't do
diseases get
remotely
spread.
is take a dump. Is it? You physically have to be there. That's kind of part of the whole point of it, really. You can't do that remotely. You've got to sit on the toilet.
If they ever make a sequel to Enemy of the State, they have to integrate this somehow.
Maybe it plays music while you're taking a dump, you know?
Or Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire.
Yeah. Well, you can lift Muzak. Now you've got toilet Muzak.
As I say, again, it's one of those things where I'm delighted to say, like I'm sure everyone else here, I'm in possession of an unhackable toilet. It doesn't have an app. But I mean, obviously, I have to go through the arduous task of remembering to flush it, which, according to Steve, is a bit of a challenge. But no, other than that, that's again.
Depends what you're trying to flush away, I suppose. How big a challenge it is.
Yeah, but come on, unless Steve, you're going to tell me that it was able to detect if you had 9 pints of Guinness and a 22-ounce steak, and it would just keep going until such time as the job was done. Presumably, it would only do one automatic flush. When
it would actually start to gently sort of stream water down the sides of the bowl when you sat down, in preparation, presumably, for what was to come.
Like a lubrication, so it can slip.
Yeah,
down the sides.
effectively, preparing the bowl for the large curry.
For the onslaught.
Have we plumbed new depths here?
Yeah.
Well, we are talking about plumbing, so yeah, probably.
I was once sat on it though when the earthquake happened, and I just thought this was just my luck.
You sure it wasn't a huge fart?
No, it was genuinely an earthquake. But I was just sitting there thinking, I can't believe I'm going to die on the toilet like Elvis. How undignified! What a way to go! My trousers around my knees. But thankfully, the earthquake stopped before the building fell down.
Bridge over troubled waters.
I like that.
James is sit down. That sort of might work.
All sit down. Yeah.
Tsunami by Manic Street Preachers.
Don't it make my brown eyes blue?
What's that? Isn't there a Blur song? Is it song number 2?
Yeah, there is song 2. That's quite a good call. There is a song called "Stuck in the Toilet." Apparently, you can download.
Is it the Steelers wheel?
It's dubstep.
Stuck in the middle with you. I suppose.
Literally just checking the internet. There is apparently a song called "Hot Mess" by Chromio. Actually, Chromio stuff's normally quite good, so you might be a win-win on that one. So yeah.
Oh, Scatman.
Oh, no.
Okay, so moving on, let's go to Mark. Right, Mark, games news?
Nothing. We've got the gaming podcast out on the same day that this is, so go and listen to that if you want gaming news.
All right, so we're not good enough for the gaming news now, is that what you're saying?
Did you even read Steve's emails?
No.
Oh, you never do.
No, I did for once this week, and it said don't bother preparing.
Backfired, doesn't it?
The one time you read it was the one where it said you've got nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly. I'm playing Skyrim here.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh,
But
smells
Rim
like Teen
again.
Spirit.
So, yeah, Mark's right. The Games Podcast is out this week. Go and have a listen for that. And what subjects are you covering in the Games Podcast this month?
Oh, a long rambling discussion that I'm sure Steve will edit into something approximating a podcast. Touch on... Oh, Christ. Let me think there for a second. I've got it written down somewhere. Amazon possibly doing a console, the plight of the Wii U, and the Xbox One unboxing, as well as general topic discussions about Shinji Mikami's The Evil Within and the plight of modern horror games.
So that's the AVForums Games Podcast. Go and listen now.
But finish this one first.
Or don't if you couldn't give monkeys about games.
No toilet humour on the Games Podcast, I bet.
I don't know. Have you listened to it?
Well, no, obviously not. I couldn't give a about games.
That's terrible. Saying that in front of Mark as well. Come on. Show some respect, Steve.
Guarantee you Mark does not listen to this podcast. Am I right?
I plead the fifth.
You don't have to. He was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I always listen to it anyway to see how it came out, basically.
Yeah.
That's more in the way. That's more in the way that you stop and look at accidents on the motorway. It's like, what on earth has happened this time?
To see how much I'd been cut out of it. That's why I usually listen to it.
Hey, I lost a complete diatribe last week.
Yeah, you were cut out heavily. Like you were the man on the cutting room floor last week, but for good reason. You just go into a bit of a rant.
Well, we had agreed.
Well, we're going to be talking about that again in a minute, so you got another opportunity.
You know,
rant.
I didn't fancy a meeting with the lawyers on that one. So.
No,
we could have done loads of Muddy Waters songs.
Drop it like it's hot.
Oh, Mark, I watched Breaking Bad.
Oh, good. I don't.
Really good. It was.
I don't know if I need it. So there's 2 or 3 episodes available. I can't. I'm going to be left dissatisfied if I can't.
Oh no, but no, it's every Monday morning now. Bit of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, but that's a long wait for the way I watch TV.
Yeah, you're supposed to be doing work on a Monday morning, guys.
This is true.
One of the entire benefits of being self-employed is that when everyone else gets up on a Monday, I don't. It's literally about the only thing I've been able to.
It's like your one pleasure in life.
Yeah, wait till the baby arrives, Ed. Then it's tough.
I'm making the most of it now.
Yeah, make the most of it now.
Yeah, sleep will be a fond childhood memory to you pretty soon, won't it, Mark?
The first few weeks were all right. They lull you into a false sense of security by sleeping all the time, just generally being all right. Just gets worse and worse.
Well,
for the rest of your life.
The first 10 years are the worst, followed by the next 10 years.
That is just shit.
Yeah, after that it goes steadily downhill.
If that happens, I'll take up my parents' idea. I say I went away to boarding school at 7.
Phil, did you watch?
You can see why sometimes.
Family Guy last night.
I did.
Not
yes,
you personally.
I did.
Please don't kill me. I'm not married. I've got something to live for. It was really funny when Brian gets caught caressing Lois's tits.
You're having a dream.
I'm not. Then he hits her with a vase and just takes it out the door, doesn't he?
Yeah, there was cats in that one. You'd like it, Ed.
I did see it last night. Yeah,
what was the cat's name? Mr. What? Pilkington, Puffington or something like that.
I just prefer cats to dogs. Dogs are just smelly and intrusive.
Oh, well, as opposed to aloof and, and unsociable.
Glenn, have you been to this strip club before? Yeah, about 20 years ago.
Twins that like him, isn't there? Doing the Vulcan V meld.
Your fog lamps are on. Your fog lamps are on. There's no fog. There's no fog. No fog.
What's at the cinema, Steve?
Alan Partridge, Alpha Papa. I mean, it always is a danger when any TV show, particularly a half-hour comedy show, makes a transition to the big screen. The danger is, can it carry itself for an hour and a half, or is it going to feel like a TV show that's been stretched out to an hour and a half? Well, one thing I can say about Alan Partridge is it does the transition perfectly. It's genuinely an entertaining movie. It's shot in the scope ratio 2.35:1, which gives it a kind of more of a cinematic feel. It's got a decent plot. I mean, it's kind of a reworking, really, of Dog Day Afternoon, where one of Alan's co-workers is sacked and then basically goes into the station with a shotgun and holds some of the people in the station hostage, and Alan's being used as a go-between between the police and his friend who is the hostage taker. And that's the kind of premise, and that gives them plenty of room to play with, both in terms of set pieces. There's some absolutely hysterical, laugh out loud moments in this film, but it's just a string of constant witticisms from Partridge. Coogan, who is very much a comedy actor and not a comedian, is absolutely brilliant in it. He really is a good actor, and he plays Partridge to the T. As the sort of the siege spirals out of control, you can see Alan thinking, I can work this to my advantage, and as he gets more and more popular through the course of the siege, his ego becomes more and more rampant, and it gets worse and worse, and it is just brilliantly funny. Solid supporting cast all round. Cole Meany's great as Pat, who's basically the sack DJ. There's some very cutting barbs against I guess media conglomerates and taking over small, obviously North Norfolk Digital has taken over and turned into Shape Radio. Not even that, just Shape. There's not even any radio in it. It's just a media centre, and they start getting rid of some of the older DJs, which is why Pat gets sacked, and they bring in sort of trendy idiots and their sort of morning shows, and it is very funny in that sense. Most of the characters you'll recognise from the TV show pop up at some point. The Geordie Doorman has 2 of the best scenes in the film that are absolutely hysterical. I mean, basically, I'd kind of forgotten that Patrick Marber and Armando Iannucci helped co-create Alan Partridge, and Armando Iannucci is one of the writers on the script. And given that he successfully transitioned the thick of it to the big screen for In the Loop, he again does a great job here. It's a very, very fun. If you're a fan of Partridge, you'll love it. If, like Ed, perhaps not so much, then I guess you won't go and see it. But I think anyone who's a fan of Alan Partridge and Steve Coogan will definitely enjoy it. But I think even if you're not massively familiar with Alan Partridge, I think you'll still find an incredibly funny film. It is just very well observed and very well made, and Coogan delivers the goods in terms of the performance. So a definite solid 8 out of 10 for that one.
You see, the problem I have with Alan Partridge is I find him hilarious, but in half-hour segments, because some of the humour is just so embarrassing. You know, that real embarrassment humour. I find myself cringing too much, and for an hour and a half I would be...
There isn't actually that much of the massive... There's a few bits of classic Partridge embarrassment, but they tend to, I think for that very reason, Phil, they do tend to keep that to the minimum, because, yeah, you're right, you couldn't take an hour and a half of cringing. But you got some top drawer slapstick in there, some really, really funny. I mean, there's a scene where he tries to get out of window and his trousers get stuck on one of the the little things you put the window. What do they call those things that when you open a window and you latch? Thank you. Yes, that's the word. He gets stuck on the latch and his trousers and pants fall down. It is really, really funny.
Highbrow comedy, then, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, totally not at all. Not what arse jokes and knobs, but ultimately that is funny. And there's some other stuff, but yeah, they do try and I think they tone down a bit on the embarrassment factor and go more for out and out gags sometimes. But there's also just tons and tons of those kind of asides that are just really, really funny. You know, my concern going into the film, and I think I talked about this with you, Mark, is that it didn't look that hysterical in the trailers, and you kind of think, are they going to be able to pull it off for an hour and a half? But they do, basically. That's the bottom line, they do.
No, I've not seen it. It'll lead you in nicely, but my local cinema has got the Lone Ranger instead of, so I've got to wait for the Lone Ranger.
Only got one screen?
Yes.
Your local cinema's only got one.
Yes.
When did you live? 1984 or something?
They closed down the big one.
Some bloke's house.
It is more or less a really good home cinema in the top of a local heritage centre. That's what I've got to deal with.
Sorry, where do you live? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for that segue, Mark.
There you go.
Yes, the other film is The Lone Ranger. Now, there are times when you sit in the cinema and think, what were they thinking? They spent $250 million on this,
a quarter of $1 billion,
and another $175 million marketing it. That's $400 million on a cowboy movie. To break even, it has to make $800 million worldwide. It's not going to get anywhere near that, by the way. So they've already written off $150 million because it tanked in the US. So, but you're thinking, okay, cowboy movies never make much money, even in America. They have no international appeal whatsoever. The last cowboy movie was probably Cowboys versus Aliens. That had Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig in it. John Favreau directing off the back of Iron Man, and it tanked. So spending $250 million on a cowboy movie, even though we've got Johnny Depp in it, he's got a big national fan base, yeah, but not that strong, to be honest. And frankly, I found it slightly insulting that they cast Johnny Depp as Tonto, the Indian character, the Native American, should we say? It's a bit like casting an unknown as Batman and Brad Pitt as Robin. He just completely unbalances the entire movie because, the Lone Ranger isn't the star of his own film. Tonto is basically the star in every sense of the word. He narrates the thing from the beginning. He manipulates everyone within the film. It is a Tonto movie with a bit of Lone Ranger thrown in for good measure, which in itself is just bizarre. There's some great set pieces in it. You can see where the money went. I mean, it's up there on the screen, no question about it. But at the end of the day, you're kind of thinking, like, I'm not quite sure what the point was, really. And also, it makes light of what was effectively genocide. So I really do get quite annoyed about that too. And I am
come on, Steve. Genocide's always funny. Oh no, wait, hang on. No, I've got that wrong.
Genitals. You're thinking of genitals.
Yes.
And I'm utterly sick of Johnny Depp, to be honest. I'm sick of his antics, his shtick. It's just like all the mugging to camera. He's been playing cartoon characters for the last 20 years. The best thing he's done recently is probably Rango, where he gets to play an animated character, because that's the best thing for him. I just sat...
Who cares about the Lone Ranger anymore, anyway?
Well, no one cared about it. They made a film with the Lone Ranger in 1981 called The Legend of the Lone Ranger. That tanked as well. And that was a massive budget movie.
And it was more current then than it is now.
Quite. And it's 2.5 hours long. It's way too long. Middle section I nodded off a couple of times because I was getting quite bored. It's got a good beginning, good end, and a very long, boring middle section. Convoluted plot. But even though it's really convoluted, you can tell from the beginning what's going to happen. You can think, okay, I bet he's that, and I bet he does that. So, it's just... what they were trying to do, quite obviously, was thinking, okay, we'll get Jay Bruckheimer, Gore Verbinski, Johnny Depp, the writers of Pirates of the Caribbean. We'll have another massive money-making franchise. No, you haven't, guys. Back to the drawing board.
This just brings up the story which Ed found this week, and I guess we have been discussing it over the last few weeks in the podcast, and that is the fact that the bubble has to burst at some point. All these comic book heroes, all these franchise movies, sequels, all the rest of it, and the vast amounts of money, the obscene amounts of money that they are throwing at these sequels and franchises. The bubble has to burst. There's no way that they can keep this up, especially if Disney are taking as big a hit as they are on the Lone Ranger. So, where does things go? I mean, what is it that's going to burst the bubble? I jokingly said the Batman versus Superman movie, but you could very well be right there.
The article is in itself comedic, but behind that there are just some bold numbers in it which just stagger the mind. I mean, we've already discussed that $250 million has been spent on the Lone Ranger, which is probably which still takes some time to get your head round. But there would be this summer alone, 16 films have cost more than $100 million to make. Obviously, money is a bit of an abstract sort of construct when you get to numbers of this size. But even so, sooner or later, there's just so much of the stuff being invested. And whilst we send Steve off every week to watch everything, and my wife is doing the best she can to do the same thing as well, these people are very much in a minority. There's just no way that you're going to see the money back.
Well, I mean, the Avengers made 1.6 billion worldwide. You think, oh, that's a lot of money. But, I didn't realize until I read another article based on that article that you sent me, Ed, that in order to break even, it had to make at least $1 billion to make $1 billion. Now, I think 16 movies in the history of cinema have made over $1 billion. So, they were betting the farm on that one to a degree. It's getting to the point where, the numbers just don't add up anymore. I mean, Disney have taken a hit on the Lone Ranger. They took a similar sized hit last year on John Carter. I think in that case, that wasn't actually. I enjoyed the movie. I think it was just badly marketed and it had a terrible title. But that's two hits they've taken. Now they can offset those hits against the fact they've had big successes with Iron Man 3 and with the Avengers recently. But you've already made the point, Ed, that there's at some point the comic book movie cycle is going to burst. The bubble's going to burst on that one. I think the tipping point is going to be 2015 because you've got a whole host of mega budget movies all hitting the cinema in a same sort of 2-3 month period. And as you've just said, people only go to the cinema a certain number of times in a year, never mind in a month.
Last time I was there was Skyfall.
Yeah, well, you're not a really good example, though, are you?
I don't know.
Yeah. I think more people go to the cinema. When did you last go to the cinema, Mark?
To see Monsters something.
University.
Yeah. Yeah.
It left a lasting impression.
I quite enjoyed it.
Mr. Botwright.
I went to see Pacific Rim.
That's a good name for a Japanese toilet, isn't it?
The Fast and the Furious 6 for me, whilst I remember. So, yeah, still a while.
Oh, yeah.
I think the last one I went to see was Iron Man 3. I had high hopes to go and see Pacific Rim and various other bits and bobs, but as always, life tends to kick me in the short and curlies.
Always gets in the
way.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think most of us have been to the movies at least once this year, apart from Phil. But 2015, you've got Star Wars 7. You've got Superman, Man of Steel 2. There's the Avengers 2 coming. There's a Transformers sequel coming to Transformers 4, I think. Is that next year? The year after next, there's a Terminator movie coming. There's a possible Jurassic Park 4. There's a sequel to Finding Nemo, Finding Dory. There's just a lot, and that's the top of my head. I know there's lots more than that, all coming in the space of the same period. Now, you're going to get some bombs in there. We question of whether the studios in question, I mean, Disney can weather the last couple of years where it's had some pretty high-profile bombs because it's also had some massive successes. Other studios like Universal haven't really had that kind of box office. They could ill afford to drop 200 million on something.
I mean, I have to say, I'm not that pessimistic, even if we do have a complete and absolute implosion. If you think back to look at the parallels in the music industry, where there was a phase where it didn't matter that certain stuff was tanking because certain things were just shoe-ins, and it didn't matter what happened. You'd make a ton of money off them. That sort of has gone. But obviously there are key differences between the sort of independent people bring their work to a wider audience independently with music than there are with films. There's far bigger hurdles. But it's not like the collapse in the amount of money that organisations have to spend has actually necessarily affected the quality of the output. And there's just been different routes to market and different ways of delivering the material.
I mean, you have to look at the story there about Expendables 3 and Bruce Willis being booted out because you wanted $1 million a day for 4 days' work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's done himself any favours there, because Sylvester Stallone went public with the reason why he's not in the film, and he said, he's greedy, and he actually called him greedy and lazy. So I guess he's off Bruce's Christmas card list. Well, I mean, it's funny, we were talking about last week about how Bruce just phoned in Die Hard 5 and phoned in Red 2. He just doesn't seem to care anymore. He's just taking a paycheck, and it's a shame because I used to really like Bruce Willis.
We don't know how it's panning out. We need a crystal ball to do that, but it does strike me that with this many films and this much money, it's the whole thing where it doesn't have. You don't even have to recognise that it as a turkey for it to be potentially catastrophic to some of the studios. As you were saying, some of the ones that aren't Disney are in. It doesn't augur too well for them, it must be said. It's a sort of massive all stakes game where only one or two of the players actually can afford the stakes they're putting down.
It's a bit like the Premier League, isn't it?
Sorry. Yeah. I was going to say the problem is that we keep saying things like, oh well, do more original material, stop making all these sequels and all these franchises and all and converting adapting comic book material and this kind of stuff. Do something original. But the problem is when people studios do something original. Mostly, there are exceptions. I mean, there's an exception in Inception, which was an original piece by Christopher Nolan and was a big hit, and was pretty much a genuine gamble on the part of Warner Bros. I think, although I think they trusted Nolan after doing Dark Knight. But look at this year. Pacific Rim hasn't done very well. After Earth bombed. World War Z is going to make a reasonable amount of money, but certainly was nowhere near the size of the hit they expected it to be. It will at least break even. But there's little incentive for studios to take risks on original material if even that stuff isn't delivering with an audience. At least with their franchise, you got like Star Wars 7. That's going to make $1 billion, right? I mean, I'll bet my hat on it now. No question about it.
Can we see the hat first? I want to know what sort of stake you're putting down here.
It's going to make $1 billion easy, no question about it. Just on the back of the name Star Wars, and we've given that they're bringing in the original cast and everything. I think it's going to be a huge hit.
You don't have kids, Steve, but on the Disney Channel they're already milking it, and nothing's really happened. Star Wars at left, right, and centre.
Do you not think that's why they're spending so much money on things like The Lone Ranger? They're not looking at one film. They're looking at the possibility that you might bankroll half a dozen at 200 million, but if you get one that ends up like a Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, then you're making so much off the back of that it almost wipes it out. They're not looking in kind of almost yearly cycles or 5-year cycles. They're looking kind of 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's it for The Lone Ranger for me. That seems to be the whole premise behind it, was that they were hoping to get another Pirates franchise out of it, especially with Depp. That's what they were looking for. I mean, it's plainly obvious that that's why that movie exists.
Well, isn't it also John Depp's wanted to do it for years? It has Vanity Project written all over it. More so than Jack Sparrow ever did. It's just something that he's had a bee in his bonnet about doing, and he carries sufficient clout that they can spend a space program's worth of money on the problem.
Well, I mean, Steve, you said the other day when we were discussing this, about Depp and his acting ability, and he always plays eccentric characters. He always plays for the laugh, and I racked my brain to try and think of, and it's not a very big brain, to think of performances where he really gave it all and it wasn't the usual Depp. And the only one I could think about was Ed Wood.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
But then
even Ed Wood is an eccentric character.
Yeah,
exactly. He's playing that character again.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. No, I was trying to think of
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Platoon. You've got to go back to his early films before you find a film where he's just playing a normal person.
Didn't he do some sort of thing involving a book that sent people to hell or something. I'm not suggesting for a second it was a good film, but he wasn't an eccentric in it. It's one of the reasons why it's dreadful.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Secret Window or something like that, wasn't it?
No.
Window.
Secret Window. Yeah, the Secret Window.
He did Donnie
King,
Brasco. In Donnie Brasco, he plays a pretty regular guy, and he's good in that. But that was a long time ago, Donnie Brasco, wasn't it?
It just seems like for the past kind of decade, pretty much he's just been almost like he's breaking down that fourth wall. Every performance is almost like with a nod and a wink to the audience.
Yeah.
Sweeney Todd.
Well, again, that's pretty eccentric. Unless you're about to drop some revelations about your barber.
No, I just got an affliction. I say Sweeney Todd just occasionally slips out. I can't help it.
This is the most specific Tourette's in the world.
I suppose the good news for studios is that at least ancillary sales are still strong. So we were talking about Dread last week. Dread didn't do very well at the cinema, but has done extremely well in terms of DVD and especially Blu-ray. And I guess that's keeping a lot of studios afloat with some of the big, some of the box office failures or disappointments that they've had in recent years.
We have to wait and see how it's going to develop. 2015 could be a turning year, but where things are strong is with Blu-ray sales, which is surprising. Given the fact that lots of comments even on our forums that the disc is dead, it's all going to be downloading and streaming from now on, but it seems to be that Blu-ray sales have never been better.
I think they're up 15% in the first half of the year, which is considerably stronger than DVD. Obviously, the biggest rise has been in digital downloads. They're up 50% on the first half of the year. But even so, given I'm like many of us here, I think we're all fans of the digital, physical media. I'm happy to see that people are still buying in increased numbers Blu-rays, because that means that there's still life in the format. And I've still got my fingers crossed that we'll get some kind of 4K Blu-ray system.
Well, you see, this brings up an interesting question. What films have you bought on formats? Across all the formats, and we were having this conversation earlier on. I think it's a good point to bring it up at the minute. How many times have you bought the same film but on a different format?
I've bought Apocalypse Now on VHS, DVD, then I bought Redux on DVD, and now I've bought it on Blu-ray. I think that's my worst, if I'm honest.
I bought Terminator 2 on VHS, both pan and scan and letterboxed. Then I bought it on Laserdisc, both normal theatrical cut, then special edition box set. Then I owned it on VCD, DVD. I bought it on DVHS, HD DVD, and Blu-ray, and on most of those cases, multiple times in all those formats. So I've owned that film at least 20 different times.
Do you like the film?
I'm not even sure I actually like the movie.
I was just going to say, do you like the film?
Terminator 2.
Well, I think
20 times.
I think I've probably bought Star Wars films the most across all formats, to be honest, including £300 on the definitive box set on Laserdisc.
Ouch.
To be fair, you will get. I think you get your money back on that if you actually look at what that commands these days.
I sold it a long time ago, Ed.
Oh well, that's you cashing in too early.
The guy that came round wouldn't buy the Laserdisc player unless I threw that in as part of the deal. So, because I also had stuff like Toy Story box set and stuff. Oh, the amount of Laserdiscs I had and the money that I wasted on it.
Yeah, don't even want to start crying.
I still actually have. I have a functioning Laserdisc player. I even saw it the other day. But I think mini disc was. Given that I have no means of playing a mini disc now, and I spent a lot of money, especially on the hardware, that's my most expensive.
I've got to say,
this format.
I went mini disc. I had mini disc in the car. I had mini disc separates, and I loved the edit functionality. That's
yeah.
I thought it was superb.
No. There was a lot to be. Not to be good about it, but yeah, I mean, I spent £500 or whatever on a JA20 ES separate, with the actual tray drive rather than the sort of pop eject mechanism. Made no difference at all, but it looked cool. but needless to say, that transport was the thing that did it. A piece of plastic worth about 5p sheared off, and that was it. It was totaled. So you couldn't sell me a replacement mech. So it's like, well, to the skip it goes. It was depressing, and that was the end of it. I just knocked it on the head after that. I was so disenchanted.
Simon, what's your guilty pleasure on different formats?
It's I've been thinking about it. I think it's just about every film that's been named. Terminator, I've bought in. I remember getting the very first film I ever bought was the first Terminator on VHS, and I've since owned it on DVD, Blu-ray, 2 versions of Blu-ray. Terminator 2, like you, Steve, I had it on 2 or 3 different VHS versions of it because there are 2 or 3 that come out. I had it on HD DVD. I've now got 2 versions of it sitting in the rack over there on Blu-ray. Star Wars, I had the original first letterbox VHS of Star Wars in the white boxes. Wish I still had those. They're worth a bloody fortune now. And the various re-releases, incredible.
Seemingly the making ofs in the white boxes are worth a fortune.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in HMV and thinking, do I want to spend 25 quid on these 3 VHSs or not? And I walked out, and I regret that.
See, I had the bastards, and I think I moved house and left them.
Why? They were worth a fortune.
They were the first.
Yeah, and
the first time.
Oh, just because they were the first time.
They were the first time. They were widescreen in the original format.
I had those. They were awful
boxes.
though, weren't they? NTSC transfers. They were a really crappy picture.
Yeah, but you didn't care back then. You couldn't get
tell
on
the
any
tellies, could you?
Yeah. Watching Star Wars in a widescreen format for the first time since I'd seen it at the cinema when those VHS tapes came out was a revelation. So I'm actually thinking, oh god, the composition looks really nice on that shot.
I have actually just found something interesting here. It's interesting the Terminator keeps cropping up. Weirdly, the most expensive piece of vinyl I've ever bought is the Terminator soundtrack.
Is that right?
It's strange to relate, yeah, because I bought it for my wife's birthday present. It's my wife's favourite film, and she's particularly obsessed with the sheer 80s nostalgia that is the soundtrack. And in Europe, the CD was never released, and obviously it's an excuse to buy vinyl. So, yes, I bought a mint copy, and by that I mean actual classification of mint, for 52 quid. So, yeah. Wow.
I had the chance to buy that at $5.99 in a record shop. Never did.
Still doesn't
that's why I guess it's a relatively rare and expensive thing.
No, it still doesn't come close to. It still doesn't come close to some of the money that I've blown on Laserdiscs. Steve will back me up on this. I mean, Jesus, we'd save up for months to buy some of this stuff, and I can't believe that I'd be spending 300 quid on films that I already had on Laserdisc, but I wanted the box set with the book and the nice packaging and the artwork. And I guess that's one thing.
Just a normal film, a normal Blu-ray, a normal Laserdisc release would be, 20, 30 quid.
Yeah. And
then you'd be paying £100 for a box set.
Yeah, but then you had to pay for the US version, because the UK versions, although Pioneer did their best when they released them, and they were a studio at that point for releasing Laserdisc, because they're the only company building the players, you still had to go for the US version because it was uncut and it had all the extras and...
Yeah. And then because we had to import it from the States, and it used to cost a fortune. And absolutely, I used to buy mine from Ken Crane's Laserdisc.
But then we're talking about 4K possibly coming on a format now. What happens if that's 45 quid a film?
Then it's doomed, then, isn't it? Is the simple answer in this day and age?
The market won't tolerate that, will they, Phil?
I mean, one of the reasons why I can imagine that Blu-ray sales have actually done all right is that I don't know about anyone else here, but I have noticed that the pricing has become distinctly less ambitious in this, certainly even over the last 6 to 8 months.
It seems to be where you go though, because I was in Asda the other day and had the Disney 3D stuff was like 25 quid. Whereas there was some chart titles that were like £12. It didn't really make much sense.
Disney tend to price quite high, but I've noticed in a lot of releases from other studios, the DVD will be like a tenner and the Blu-ray will be 15 quid. So the differential is minimal now. And, I still find it amazing that people are buying DVDs. I haven't bought DVDs since 2006. And people still buy DVD players. I think, well, who buys those? And most people have a high-def TV. So buy a Blu-ray player and watch really good quality high-def content.
There are loads.
Far in excess.
There are loads of films that haven't come out on Blu-ray, though.
Yeah, but they're getting there. I mean, there's quite a lot. It's very few.
Yeah, but Mark,
major standouts for me now. The Abyss is the one I'm waiting for.
Mark, you're very much niche, though, aren't you? In your tastes.
Probably.
Probably.
I mean, I used to buy quite a few from CD Japan. I mean, is that still going, Mark? Are you still into your Asian films and buying stuff that way?
Are we going to get onto the topic of piracy? I'll say no.
But even then, I remember buying True Lies, the DTS version on DVD, and spending £50 on it because I had to buy it from Japan.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of big hope with a lot of the kind of obscure films is that, in fact, they're usually like one generation behind. So like there's quite a lot of stuff that we're only just seeing very good quality DVD releases, or in fact, even on Blu-ray, it's kind of what you'd consider kind of good quality DVD release. So my hope is that simply once we get 4K, we might see better quality Blu-rays of some of these films.
I think that's fair.
The Killer, for a start.
Yes, exactly. The Killer, all of John Woo's Hong Kong work. I mean, I'd love to see the original cut of A Better Tomorrow too, but that's probably it's sat in some triad's basement somewhere.
Mark, you've mentioned Hong Kong now.
During the war. I've just noticed that actually, because for years the seminal childhood masterpiece that was BMX Bandits, you couldn't buy that on anything other than VHS. But I've just seen, and you can,
with a very young Nicole Kidman.
With a very young
yes,
Nicole Kidman.
very young with Nicole Kidman.
But it took them ages to get a DVD out of that masterpiece, and now you can actually buy
There is still no anamorphic DVD of The Abyss or True Lies. And you can think so, and they're not available on Blu-ray yet. And it's kind of, you think James Cameron's really into like picture quality and home cinema. Get your finger out, James.
He's probably making them in 3D.
No, they're releasing them next year, because next year's the 20th anniversary of The Abyss and 20th anniversary of True Lies. As if anybody cares or is going to base their buying decision upon whether it's the anniversary or not. Just get the damn things in the marketplace, please. It's one of my favourite films, The Abyss.
Can take or leave that, but True Lies is bloody marvellous.
You can't do comedy Arabs anymore, not after 9/11.
No, that's why. But that's why it's such a piece of its time.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
It is brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Are we back onto Pandora's box now?
And well, that's it for another AVForums podcast. My thanks to Mark Botwright.
Sorry, just preoccupied. We're doing quotes, aren't we?
Yeah.
All right. Yes. Do you want to go again, or will you be able to cut this?
Yeah, I'll just cut this bit out.
Jazz flute is for little fairy boys.
Steve Withers.
Good night. I'm Ron Burgundy. Go fuck yourself, San Diego.
Simon Crust.
What's the matter with him? He says the birds are scrounging.
And Mark Hodgkinson.
You know I don't speak Spanish.
And finally, Ed Selly.
Milk was a bad choice.
So you can follow us on Twitter at AVForums, on Facebook.com/AVForums, and bookmark AVForums.com for the latest reviews, news, and videos. And also, why don't you leave us a rating on iTunes? We'd love to hear your feedback if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.